You're a sick son of a bitch!
Monkey game. There must be a way. King Kong, the most influential monkey that ever graced the silver screen. Every couple of decades or so, the silverback legend's iconic tale of love, loss, and Hollywood being stinky is retold, with each one being a good excuse to really flex the muscles of whatever technology was a mainstay in movies at the time. The Kong of the 30s showed us beautiful, meticulous stop-motion animation, pushing the boundaries of special effects and wowing audiences with its efforts in not only stop-motion animation, but projecting techniques and other cool stuff. The Kong of the 70s took the advances made in puppetry and animatronics and gave us a Kong so large it took up pretty much the entire budget for its 5 seconds of screen time. And the Kong of the 2000s gave us an incredible motion capture performance from Andy Serkis, giving us the most emotionally resonant depiction of the ape yet. Skull Island was just kind of there. So, in regards to cinema, King Kong has an almost shining reputation. Almost. Most of the films based off him are lauded for their advancements of technology, filmmaking techniques, and their ability to tell an earnest, emotional story. So let's put it on a cheese-it. This year has been pretty great for video games, but something which caught myself and a lot of other people off guard was the release of the new King Kong game. Not only because it was a King Kong game, but also that it was fucking horrible. This little low-budget money laundering scheme was shat all over by the internet and laughed at into oblivion for a good month or so after it was released, and it gave off the impression of being developed, coded, and funded solely by an actual monkey. And looking at all of this controversy and shit-flinging from afar got me thinking. Has Monkey Ape been in other game video? It turns out he has. Outside of the Peter Jackson's movie license games, which I'm pretty sure a few people played back in the day, this chimp has had, that's right, count 'em, video games. So, due to my debilitating, constant need to waste my own time, I decided to play every single one that I could get my hands on. Not to completion, I'm not that fucking insane, just enough to be able to point at it and say, yeah, that one sure has a monkey in it. The first game on the list is King Kong for the Atari 2600, and it was released the same year that Universal was suing Nintendo for Donkey Kong's similarities to their monkey. So, with the very concept of a game about climbing to defeat a monkey being under scrutiny, let's see what the real deal has to offer.
It's just Donkey Kong.
So yeah, this is beat for beat a shoddy recreation of the first screen of Donkey Kong, and it gets boring after 5 seconds, like most 2600 games. The barrels have been replaced with like little bombs guys for some reason, and when you beat it, it just kind of loops back on itself.
I think it's having a heart attack.
Fun fact, King Kong 2600 was also the first cartridge release of Tiger Vision. You know, those guys, and was received as such. The Space Gamer said, overall it's a fun to play game with some good graphics. Not bad for a first cartridge, and Arcade Express called the game a poor rendition of the giant ape. King Kong 2, Akari no Megaton Punch is an NES game made by Konami.
I fucking love Konami.
And is apparently based on King Kong Lives, which was released in the same year and is a sequel to the King Kong of the 1970s, even being called King Kong 2 in Japan. The plot follows King Kong, who after surviving his fall from the Twin Towers, in the 70s rendition Kong climbed the Twin Towers, don't ask, has been in a coma for 10 years and is in dire need of not only a blood transfusion, but a robot heart. They get the blood from a female Kong, which apparently has just been there the whole time. You think we would have noticed that? And you know, the typical capitalistic greed, like they start using the monkey for more than they should have been using the monkey for, Kong gets pissed, etc. The game explains this in a 2-second cutscene. Outside of this cutscene though, the game has basically nothing to do with the movie, and you could swap the monkey sprite out for just about anything and rename the game without anyone batting an eye. It's just standard Konami 8-bit bullshit difficulty arcade affair, and for what it is, it's pretty fun. I mean, I have no idea what's going on. These enemies are confusing, the game straight up becomes Zelda at points with random doors that teleport you across the globe. There's pretty much no cohesion, and any actual progression feels like it only happened because you stumbled upon it and not because you did something right. But, you know, like how most Atari games are only fun for 5 minutes, most NES games are only fun for 6. For what it is a quirky little time. If you want to check it out, go for it. It's an NES game. If you can't figure out how to play that on your PC, you're hopeless. And when you beat the game, you save the female Kong, and instantly Kong's family is where they need to be, restored and happy. And also the staff is introduced as the King Kong team, with the main programmer being called Kong Yamada, and I love that. Alright, here's the game that everybody's heard of. Peter Jackson's King Kong, the official game of the movie, is a first-person shooter adventure game released in 2005 for pretty much every single platform available at the time. Its whole thing, much like the film, is that it's trying to be incredibly cutting-edge and cinematic. This means there's no HUD, a letterbox view for cinematicness, and an FOB so bad it slowly drives the player to insanity. The game markets itself as an action-adventure title, and while it's true that there's plenty of big action set pieces which have you mowing down enemies, at other times it's almost survival horror, with ammo for weapons being scarce outside of the occasional set pieces, forcing you to use spears and sticks to fight off foes that will fuck you up if you're not careful, with those same tools being used to affect the environment and solve puzzles. It's nothing incredible, the interaction boils down to burning bushes and pushing doors, but it's enough to stand out, and as you progress in the game, the enemies you fight in the set pieces get bigger and bigger. So when you're stripped of that set piece and forced to survive against those same enemies later on without any ammo, it leads to sections which genuinely caught me off guard with how effectively stressful they are. This bit here with the Velociraptors right before you get the Tommy gun is a good example. It works really well, and it's the first proper time you're pitted against enemies that you can't kill with a simple spear throw. So the game really catches you with your guard down, and it's really effective with all these small crannies you need to hide in so these dinos don't eat you for dinner. It really is charming going back to this game nowadays, because while it's obviously not going to win any awards for its looks, and especially not for its controls, it still manages to sell itself as an immersive experience at points. There's parts where if you just stop and look around, it feels like you're watching some stupidly high-effort Gmod animation, and with little things like having to yell out voice lines to know how much ammo you've got left, and the game's complete commitment to never doing anything that would break immersion, it leads to an experience that's still pretty unique. Although, if you play the PC version like I did, due to it being abandonware that hasn't seen any official support since its release, there's some quirks. In my experience, the smaller enemies were complete goofballs, physics were sometimes completely broken, and taking any kind of damage did this. Which led me to think that I was dead in one hit, but no, I'm fine. It's really funny seeing the game try as hard as it possibly can to convince you it's this meticulous, immersive experience, but then having its old age kick in and shitting itself like a pensioner with crippling Alzheimer's.
The current's too strong! Run! Run! Run!
The game's plot loosely adapts that of the movie, which is to be expected from the official story of the official game of the movie, but a big drawback of that approach is that the game really loves the Skull Island portion of the film. Like, it really loves it. If you're getting sick of how this footage looks, I've got bad news for you. All of the FPS sections take place on Skull Island, and while I understand why, I mean, you can't really have shootouts in New York or anything, that would distract too much from the monkey business, but it does lead to the game feeling like the same three areas with the same murky grey and green textures over and over and over and over and over again. And by hour number 3, it can get to be a real slog. However, the game does have one other thing up its sleeve. Kong sections! This monkey mode has you possessing the large ape, swinging around pseudo 2.5D platforming sections, beating the shit out of little critters, and fighting bosses. These are fun. Yeah, sure, the controls are janky, but that's to be expected, and they give a nice breath of fresh air, breaking up the other sections so you don't flatline from brain rot. Although during the first Kong boss fight, the game lied to me and gave me the wrong controls for dashing, so that was fun, and then it wanted me to mash the right mouse button to move this chunk of debris, and it just didn't work.
Hello and welcome to my King Kong Let's Play.
After wrapping up the Skull Island plotline from the film, the game slaps you straight into New York as Kong and you rampage New York City in a pretty good ending set piece. Kong dies, the end. Overall, if you're gonna adapt this story into the gaming format, I can't think of a better way to do it. Sure, it's aged a bit and the current PC build is laughably broken, but if you can grab the 360 version or the PS2 one,
Which for the record I wanted to play, but it requires a DualShock 2 and cannot be played with the DualShock 1, but every DualShock 2 I buy is broken, I blame the bitch of a triangle button.
give it a go. Snack break.
For today's snack time, boyfriend and I decided that we wanted to have some traditional Mexican cuisine. Unfortunately, there was not any available, so we decided to go to Taco Bell instead. I ordered 2 tacos and chips and then another taco and a drink, and my boyfriend got the same thing. Look, there I am. I actually have a soft spot for Taco Bell and enjoy it quite a bit, even if it is slop that's slapped together by a 16-year-old faster than you can slap the shit out of a baby. So overall, I'm gonna give this Taco Bell a 10 out of 10, which is what I always give Taco Bell because I have no standards. Join us next time when I eat rotting garbage out of a sewer.
Alright, the next games are all just kind of bad and don't have much to talk about, so we're gonna do what I like to call the King Kong, the official handheld version of the official game of the official movie, is officially a top-down adventure title with multiple playable characters, and feels like if some weirdly dedicated fan of Mario and Luigi made a ROM hack which ditches the combat and drops the plumbers on Skull Island. It's neat, but it gets boring after an hour. You can also play as King Kong, and if you die, he does the Family Guy death pose.
Kong the Animated Series is a 2D platformer for the GBA based off of, well, Kong the Animated Series. The game is your typical GBA version of a licensed game that has 1/5 of the budget of a console game, so they made a 40-minute long 2D platformer but with the fun addition of having 2 playable characters. You play as Kong, who has the worst jump in platforming history, and this guy, I skipped all the dialogue, who walks incredibly slowly, has terrible controls, and has a cane weapon which does jack shit. Oh, it's Dr. Jekyll! The game also has the distinction of forcing you to grab 3 tombstones to be able to complete every single level, which turns a mediocre platformer which you can breeze through into a nightmare slog trying to find 3 tiny items in every single level for way longer than I'd like to admit. The game sucks. It's the console game, but it's on a Cheez-It, so it's really bad. Also, Jack Black has seen the horrors of the beneath. It's the PS2 game, but it's worse. Kong King of Atlantis is a 2D platformer based off the straight-to-DVD movie Kong King of Atlantis, which is a tie-in to Kong the Animated Series, and it features a story so far removed from anything King Kong it's insane that it's a real product at all. It's about the evil queen of the lost city of Atlantis, Queen Reptilla, returning to Earth and trying to trick the giant fucking monkey into being the new King of Atlantis. The game is really fucking bad. It's a side-scroller beat-em-up they made for old flip phones. I couldn't find a way to emulate it. It's pinball! It's pinball with a monkey on it! Okay. Skull Island: Rise of Kong is a third-person action game developed by Iguanabee and published by Game Mill Entertainment, a company who has been in the news twice this year for broken and terrible license games. The game tells the story of King Kong's origin, his tragic origin in fact, as when Kong was just an itty-bitty baby, his parents were murdered by the beast known as Gore, forcing Kong to hide away and fend for himself until he's strong enough to finally defeat his arch-nemesis. I mean, fuck it, we've already made the guy the ruler of Atlantis, why not give him a superhero backstory and revenge plotline? Monkey Aqua Batman. So that's the game. You run around beating the snot out of any creatures you see. Or ignoring the fights because the enemies are so slow and brain dead you can easily skip any non-essential battle. You occasionally fight a boss, look at an ugly cutscene, and you're done. Now, of course, there is some nuance. Kong has a skill tree. And that's the skill tree. There's collectibles. This happened to me. Okay, this game had an awful development. In an article by The Verge, it was revealed that Game Mill only gave Iguanabee a year to make the entire game from scratch, and most of the time, there was only a small handful of people working on the game. This game is just so sad, so puny, and so clearly a product of crunch time and shameful development that playing it and talking about how much it sucks just makes me feel bad. Like, no doy the textures are stretched beyond comprehension and the world in front of you can barely keep itself loaded. Of course the physics feel like the first thing someone makes in Unity where they follow a YouTube tutorial and don't try to alter the weight of anything whatsoever. And no shit the game as a whole is just barely keeping it together with combat sections sometimes being unbeatable because enemies just decide to run away from you, no clip into the wall, and can't be defeated. If you get any developer from any team and tell them to make a 4-hour-long beat-em-up which is fully 3D with multiple explorable areas in a year from scratch, this is what they'll give you. The same way I complained about Megaton Punch having seemingly directionless progression which never gives any indication to the player of where they were supposed to go, Rise of Kong revives that format, dragging you kicking and screaming through labyrinths of hastily thrown together asset-flipped hellscapes. This is supposed to be a swamp. Why is there coral everywhere? It honestly does start to get a bit eerie at certain points when all the enemies in an area are dead and there's nothing left but the ambience. It's like Worlds.com or some ARG game that's intentionally trying to feel like an empty, soulless world, but it's completely unintentional. Platforming sections are clunky and needlessly precise. The game gives you abilities in the beginning which are just dropped after the opening and never come back. There's really no actual objectives. The game just tells you to roar to see where to go, but there's no way to differentiate between funny lines that progress the story, funny lines that lead you to a useless collectible, or funny lines that take you to nothing. The fact that these devs were crunched and underfunded, leading to people being let go and probably untold amounts of stress and an unclear future for the dev team, all for this piece of shit, is such a shame. It does kind of put a downer note on all the people pointing and laughing at how bad the game is because, yeah, when there's a cutscene that uses a JPEG in place of a 3D model and when Kong looks confused and scared for the entire game, it's really funny. But it wasn't their fault, okay? It wasn't their fault! The worst part is, this isn't the only time Game Mill has done this to them. From what the article reveals, Iguanabee are effectively stuck in a loop, being forced into making a shitty game as fast as they can by Game Mill because it's part of their contract, and the game comes out, gets panned and shit all over because it's an undercooked mess which tanks Iguanabee's reputation even more, forcing them to take on more contracts from Game Mill just to stay in business because who else is going to hire the Rise of Kong people? This game is a tragedy. It sucks to play, and it sucks even worse that it couldn't have been any other way with the conditions they were given. Then it hit me. It's always been this way.
I've spent pretty much this entire video whining about the numerous terrible tie-in games for the numerous King Kong TV and film adaptations, and when you look at the developers of those games, it's almost always the same story. A small team of people who try to make it on their own, only to be forever doomed to make garbage based off of existing IPs as fast as humanly possible, while the big boys throw about their billions. They're trapped so that the top 1% who have it all can hastily throw out an experience for the masses just to turn another buck. But these teams never asked for this, they just wanted to make games. And much like the King who they were forced to adapt, these companies are torn down much in the same way, just for daring to have passion for an art form and trying to pursue it. It wasn't the crunch time.
It was beauty killed the beast.
Where's the monkey? Oh, okay.